You know, for decades, one of the most critical and honestly potentially explosive issues in global politics has been all about a single island in the Western Pacific. Yep, we're talking about China and Taiwan. A lot of analysts call it the world's most dangerous flashpoint. So let's break down exactly why that is. So, what is it about this small island, home to just 23 million people, that has the entire world watching? I mean, why is this relationship a constant headache for global leaders, economists, and military planners? Well, it really boils down to three key things. Okay, first off, Taiwan is a full-blown democratic success story. It has its own democratically elected government, it's a vibrant, free society, and that stands in really stark contrast to the authoritarian rule on the mainland. So you can see how its very existence is kind of a direct challenge to Beijing's whole narrative.
Second, and this is a big one, this is the most likely trigger for a direct conflict between the world's two biggest superpowers, the US and China. Seriously, any crisis here could drag both of them into a hugely destructive war, no exaggeration.
And third, Taiwan is an absolute technological titan. Its role in the global economy is just massive, way bigger than you'd expect. We're going to get into the details of that in a little bit, but trust me, it's a factor that complicates this whole thing for pretty much every nation on Earth.
All right, so let's dive into where things stand right now. At its core, the issue today is just a really tense, unwavering standoff between two totally different claims to power. And look, this isn't just tough talk. This is the official stated policy of the People's Republic of China. The thing is, Beijing has never actually governed Taiwan, but it sees the island as a renegade province that has to be unified with the mainland. And here's the kicker: by force, if necessary. That commitment right there is the main reason behind China's massive military build. So to really get how we ended up here, we've got to jump back in time a bit. The whole conflict is built on this idea of one China, but, and this is key, with two completely different ways of looking at it.
Okay, so it all traces back to 1949, right at the end of China's Civil War. You had Mao Zedong's communists taking over the mainland, creating the People's Republic of China. Meanwhile, the defeated nationalists, the Republic of China, fled to Taiwan. Now, for decades, the US actually recognized the government in Taiwan, but then came this huge geopolitical shift in 1979, when Washington switched its official recognition over to Beijing.
So, to try and manage this huge divide, both sides got really creative with their diplomatic language. The key term you'll hear a lot is the 1992 consensus. It was basically an understanding that, hey, both sides of the strait belong to one China. But, and this is the brilliant, tricky part and really the core of the problem, they never actually agreed on what one China means. And you can see that difference crystal clear right here. For Beijing, one China is simple. Taiwan is part of the PRC, period. The goal is reunification. But for Taiwan's KMT party, it meant one China, different interpretations, which kind of implies that their government, the ROC, was the legitimate one. And that fundamental disagreement, that's the political minefield they've been trying to walk through ever since. Okay, now let's bring in the third major player in this whole drama, the United States. And its policy has always been this incredibly careful, really delicate balancing act. So the US has its own one China policy, and it is crucially different from Beijing's one China principle. The US simply acknowledges Beijing's position. And pay close attention to that word choice. Acknowledges is definitely not the same as accepts. It's this deliberate ambiguity that lets Washington have formal ties with Beijing while also keeping a really strong unofficial relationship with Taipei. And this all leads to the famous policy of strategic ambiguity. What's that? Well, for decades, the US has been intentionally unclear about whether it would actually step in with its military if China invaded. It's a total diplomatic tightrope walk. The idea is to keep Beijing from attacking, but also not give Taiwan a blank check to declare formal independence and start a war. And it's really important to get this. This ambiguity isn't just a posture. It's actually backed by US law. The Taiwan Relations Act from 1979 legally requires the United States to provide Taiwan with what it needs to defend itself. It's literally the legal bedrock of the entire relationship. All right, so in recent years, as China's power has just exploded, it's developed these new ways to put the squeeze on Taiwan, methods that stop just short of an actual war. This is what people call gray zone coercion. Basically, China is running this relentless campaign to wear down Taiwan's resistance. They're using tactics that are aggressive, but not quite an act of war. We're talking about things like near-constant military patrols, daily cyber attacks, economic pressure, and a diplomatic push to isolate Taipei on the world stage. The goal is pretty clear: surround and exhaust the island and hopefully make the Taiwanese people feel like unification is their only way out.
And behind all of this pressure is just a staggering military imbalance. I mean, look at this. China's pledged defense budget for 2025 is more than 11 times bigger than Taiwan's. That huge difference really just shows you the immense challenge that Taiwan is up against.
Okay, so finally, let's get to the reason why a conflict over Taiwan would send shockwaves through literally every corner of the global economy. And believe it or not, it all comes down to something incredibly small.
Just take a look at this number. Over 90%. What on earth could one small island possibly produce that it dominates so completely? Well, that number, over 90%, that's the share of the world's most advanced semiconductor chips. The tiny brains inside pretty much all modern electronics, they're made in Taiwan, mostly by one single company, TSMC. And here's why that matters directly to you. The device you're watching this on right now, it almost certainly runs on a Taiwanese chip. Same goes for our cars, our computers, the data centers that run the internet, even the most advanced military weapon systems. So a war or a blockade of Taiwan would stop all of that production overnight. We're talking about a global economic crisis unlike anything we have ever seen before. Which leaves us with this final, really critical question. For decades, a super fragile status quo has somehow kept the peace. But in a world that is so deeply, totally dependent on this one island, what happens to all of us if that peace finally breaks?